Good evening. Welcome to CBC Vancouver News. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Dan Burritt. We are going to get to the latest on the provincial by-election in Nanaimo tonight. Early results with 7 out of 111 ballot boxes reporting that the NDP's Sheila Malcolmson has a 51% lead to the Liberal Party's Tony Harris, who is clocking in at 37%. The Green Party's Michelle Ney is registering at 7.5%. We will have all the coverage of this election tonight, but we have to begin tonight with a major story here in Metro Vancouver. Surrey RCMP are searching for a suspect deemed armed and dangerous after a transit police officer was shot earlier this afternoon. He was hit in the arm but is expected to live. All this happened at the Scott Road SkyTrain station just about 4 o'clock this afternoon in the middle of the rush hour. Dozens of police officers flooded that area searching for the man. Surrey Mounties gave the media an update a short time ago.
At approximately 4:20 p.m., Surrey RCMP received 911 calls reporting a shooting. At the same time, RCMP were alerted by Metro Vancouver Transit Police that one of their officers had been shot at the Scott Road SkyTrain station platform. The officer has received serious but non-life-threatening injuries and has been transported to hospital. The suspect is described as an adult male in his 20s with dark skin, dark stubble goatee, and a mustache. He was last seen wearing a blue hoodie, white Nike brand running shoes with a black swoosh. We currently have 2 areas of containment set up. There's King George Boulevard to 114th Avenue and 125 A Street to 124 Street. The Scott Road SkyTrain station is closed. No new vehicles can enter the area or the station, but officers are there to escort people into the parking lot and will assist them to get their vehicles out of the area. We are still asking people to avoid the area. For residents who live within the containment area, we are asking you to stay inside and to lock your doors. Please turn on any exterior lights and call 911 if you see anything suspicious. And please do not attempt to apprehend the suspect if you see him or encounter him. Please call police, call 911.
We want to show you that suspect image again. Let's put that up on the screen now. As police said, they believe him to be an adult male with dark skin and stubble as well as a mustache. He is considered armed and dangerous. If you see him, do not approach him. Consider him armed and dangerous. Call 911 right away. We're going to have more on the shooting at 11 o'clock tonight on CBC television and as always on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Now, to the other major story tonight, that by-election in Nanaimo. We have you covered on Facebook Live, on Twitter, and on our website, cbc.ca/BC. The polls have closed, and we are already seeing results. We haven't had much time to wait. In fact, let's show those results right now. Sheila Malcolmson, the NDP candidate, up at 53.3%. The Liberals' Tony Harris at 34.2%, and the Greens' Michelle Ney trailing at 7.9%. And I think we're just going to check how many polls are actually reporting now. 11 of 111 ballot boxes reporting. So expect those results to definitely change as this night goes on. This by-election has the potential to shake up the BC legislature in a very big way. Nanaimo has been an NDP fortress for years, and if it wins with Sheila Malcolmson, it will continue to govern. But if the BC Liberals win tonight with Tony Harris, here's the math. They will have 43 seats in the House, the same number as the NDP Green Alliance that's been in power since mid-2017. That would leave Speaker Darryl Plecas to cast deciding votes. And depending on which way he votes, that could trigger another general election in BC. If the Greens under Michelle Ney win tonight, presumably she will continue the Greens' cooperation with the NDP, albeit sometimes rocky. We're going to bring you up-to-the-minute results, check in with our reporters in Nanaimo, bring you analysis, and take your questions and comments through Facebook. So send them through Facebook right now. That is the best way to get a hold of us. You can also try us on Twitter. Joining us tonight is UBC political science professor Gerald Beyer. Jerry, always great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And CBC reporter Alex Migdal is here. He is watching social media. He's the person taking your comments and questions. Alex, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Dan. That's right. A lot of interest in this election this evening, and we're seeing lots of chatter on social media. So I'll be looking closely at seeing what the conversations are tonight. And of course, we will be taking your questions on Facebook Live. So make sure to send us those while you can.
Very good. Alex Migdal, thank you very much. Let's go check some of those results now. We just had reporting 14 of 111 ballot boxes. There's NDP Sheila Malcolmson still with a relatively commanding lead, 53% to Tony Harris of the Liberal Party, 35%. Gerald, what are you watching for tonight? It's kind of playing out as history would intend us to believe, but what are you watching for tonight?
Certainly, the chances are that the NDP have a good chance here. They have a strong candidate, somebody who is representing the region already, although in a bigger riding at the federal level. And so, that was a key part, I think, of their strategy to make sure that they brought this one home. So having a strong candidate and having that history, we'd be looking for a real upset if that was to happen. I mean, stranger things have happened, and certainly this is a strange event in the sense that so much attention on a single by-election, in a government. But of course, we're in really an unprecedented situation in the legislature with this essentially a tie, and by throwing this one seat in, we could exactly have that tie and put so much pressure then on the speaker to have to move into the politics a little bit more than we would traditionally expect of a speaker.
Mm-hmm. We have another election result. We're going to throw this board up now for you. So let's take a look at this board right now with some of the latest results. If we have that, let's just double check here on Elections BC's website. 14 of 111 ballot boxes reported. Still, the NDP with 53% in the lead. We have Tony Harris with the BC Liberal Party, 35%. Michelle Ney up slightly, though, 7.94%. Everybody, Jerry, in this riding has name recognition, right? We've got Tony Harris, who is well known, I believe, as a car dealership. We've got Sheila Malcolmson with the NDP. Michelle Ney, I mean, that name conjures up all kinds of things, especially because of her father, who was the Nanaimo mayor and MLA for a long time.
Right, and one of these historic deviations from the NDP's history in the riding. So a social credit MLA who one of, I think, the only two times in the last 50 or so years that the NDP wasn't representing Nanaimo in the BC legislature. So some hopes pinned on that, but I think that points also to another concern about tonight is, what is the fate of the Green Party after 2017? Are they going to be able to command the kind of share of the vote that they did in that 2017 election? And so I think Green Party voters and the Green Party will be watching this closely.
And we're going to go to the board again. Sheila Malcolmson now holding with 53%. Tony Harris up slightly, 35.1%. Michelle Ney still holding at 7.9%. Do you think there's any concern, Gerald, around these numbers, especially with the NDP Green confidence supply agreement? We can't call it a truce or an alliance or we can't call it a coalition. But at the same time, any concern about vote splitting, that this could happen here and allow the Liberals to win?
Well, I mean, I think the worry was about vote splitting, that it could help the Liberals. And so, the early numbers we're seeing suggest that the NDP were effective in a strategy of arguing against that. That here are the two parties that are essentially in government now. Don't split your vote between them and let the other party come up the middle and then cause maybe not a crisis, but certainly some more uncertainty in the legislature for the next few months. And so I think definitely it'd be hard to make a strong argument that the Greens are finished if they don't do very well tonight, because part of the reason why they might not do well is that concern about vote splitting. And maybe the kinds of votes that were going to the Greens were about the 16 years of BC Liberal government rather than necessarily, you might have had some Liberal voters voting against them by voting Green in the last election. We don't know if that's going to continue into the future.
Yes, wondering if there's still some bitterness left over after 16 years, because governments tend to get some baggage. I believe we're going to go now to Tanya Fletcher, who is live at Sheila Malcolmson's headquarters. Tanya, what is going on there?
A big party, Dan. There's a few hundred people here, that's for sure, and a very festive atmosphere. The people here are very confident. A lot of big NDP supporters, lots of volunteers in the room. And someone went up to the podium and said, we can't wait to announce that the NDP candidate Sheila Malcolmson has won. Of course, we always see that during elections at the various headquarters, but certainly a confident group. And just like that, you hear people cheer every time we see the latest results come in. Of course, still very early on in the night to be predicting anything. But at this point, the NDP has a bit of a margin still early on in the night, and a lot of heavyweight support. Before, here at the Convention Centre, we were at the NDP campaign offices. And if you just walked into the room or just tuned in, you would have thought it was the John Horgan re-election campaign, because the Premier was working the room, he was talking to volunteers, he was very involved with the crowd. And Sheila Malcolmson was there as well, perhaps a bit more of a nervous energy about her, but the Premier was confident. He was joking with people, and I spoke with him one-on-one, and I asked him, Premier, how much pressure do you feel, the weight of this by-election on your shoulders? And he said, you know what, whatever the outcome, he's proud of his candidate. He is sure, very confident that she is going to win. And I asked him tomorrow morning, hypothetically, if you wake up and you have lost the seat to the Liberals, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to have 2 eggs, my turkey sausage, and I'm going to continue on with the day. He had the same answer for if the NDP was going to win the seat. His way of saying they're going to carry on as usual in at least the short term. So we'll have to see what happens with the results. But yes, definitely the Orange team is here to party, a very festive atmosphere. Dan.
Tanya Fletcher reporting live from NDP Sheila Malcolmson's candidates' headquarters. We're going to check in with Tanya a little while later. We have another result here we want to show you on the board here. Slight change here, and it's a little bit tighter. Sheila Malcolmson dropping to 48.3%. Tony Harris up about 6 points, 41.2%. Michelle Ney holding rather steady at 7.2%, 22 of 111 polls reporting, I should say. Time to go over to Liberal Party Liberal Party headquarters right now with Jesse Johnston, who is standing by with a guest. I knew I was going to get that right one of these days, Jesse. What's happening there?
You got it, Dan. Yeah, Dan here with Peace River North MLA Dan Davies, and Dan, we've had a few cheers. I know it's early on, but what's going through your mind when you're watching those early results come in?
Well, not much. I mean, in all reality, there's 111 polls yet to come in. I've been through a couple of elections on different levels, myself being one of them. It doesn't really count until the very end. That final poll comes in, and even then, we got a bunch of absentee ballots as well. So. It's really early. I think probably till we get about 80 or so polls in, then you can kind of start seeing the theme being made. But right now, it's, just here amongst friends and enjoying the evening.
It's, you've got MLAs from all over the province that are here helping out with this campaign. How much of this is about this race itself, and how much of it is about laying the groundwork and making this a winnable seat for the Liberals going forward?
Well, it's not really all about just the race and winning. I mean, it is about winning. Let's not lose that piece. But Tony's the right candidate. I've knocked on doors. I've made phone calls. I've got friends that live up here. I've got family in the area. Tony is the right candidate, and he's got a lot of support from the entire area, and we're here to support him as the right person to do the job for Nanaimoites, and that's why we're all here right now supporting him.
In a situation like this, where you have a new candidate, you're up against a party that's won this riding historically, they've done very well here. Do you get the feeling at all that you're kind of playing with house money here tonight?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a race. And, if we look at, we even look at the presence of, here Tony's campaign, large campaign helping him out. We've got the NDP throwing as much as they can at this campaign. They're certainly nervous as well. And I think a lot of it comes down to Nanaimoites want something different. And I think we've heard that just the way that this whole battle is unfolded. And I really think that people will choose the right person tonight. They'll choose someone for different. We talked the speculation tax. We're talking about ferry service. We're talking about upgrades to hospital. It's nice to throw these things, just before an election by government. But where's the meaningful piece of that? So I think Nanaimoites are ready for a change, and Tony's the right man for that.
Okay. Dan, we've got another cheer coming up. There's more polls coming in, and we'll keep you up to date with those as that goes on. Dad, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Thank you, Dan Davies, for joining us tonight as well. We've got some more results we want to bring you. Let's throw that board up right now with some of the latest results. Still pretty tight. Sheila Malcolmson, 47.2%. Tony Harris, 42.8%, less than 5. And Michelle Ney dropping slightly to 7.1%. 22 of 111 polls reporting, so still going to take some time. Gerald, we're talking about some of the math, and that's why we bring in political scientists, because journalists, we're not good at it. At least I can speak for that. Talk to us a little bit about the math and the divides in Nanaimo itself.
Yeah, so I mean, when we see that 47% right now, that's where the NDP were with Leonard Krog at the end of the last election. So they want to stay at least in that range and maybe a little higher to be able to win. But that's the sort of number that the Liberals have to get to. They're taking some of that support away, I think, from the Greens. They were more close to 20 in the 2017 election. I guess it's still early, but we're getting to close to a quarter of the results now. And the way that Nanaimo as a riding breaks down, I think, is part of the answer there, because the northern part of the riding, closer to Qualicum Beach, Parksville, is going to be more on the BC Liberal, older demographic side, and so on, and more densely populated downtown Nanaimo is more likely to support the NDP. So, when we're looking at a kind of small sample to some degree still of the votes that are coming in, that's where we're seeing these fluctuations. But, from the Liberal side, it's not a bad news story. They're on track in a way, but also so are the NDP, at least at this stage. So it's hard to know exactly, we can't predict, of course, until we see some more, but the numbers those are the number challenges for both of the parties. The NDP wants to stay in that 47%, maybe higher, and the Liberals want to get there.
We'll have to watch the math. Again, we only have about 26 of 111 ballot boxes reporting. Now, as we heard earlier, and CBC was reporting earlier this week, advance ballots were actually quite good for this election, relatively speaking, for a provincial by-election. There were about 9,000 of them that were cast, and that's about 20% of Nanaimo's 78,000 person population. So they were busy at those advanced polls. And while the candidates, and we heard from some of them earlier this week, were talking about what they were aiming at in terms of their concerns and what they were hearing on the doorsteps, we went out and chatted with voters themselves. Have a listen.
I think voters here understand the power that's in their ballots here today, given how this could affect the provincial government?
I hope so. I hope they all think, because we really need good government and strong government.
It's kind of a powerful vote, I guess you'd say.
Vote splitting is a real thing these days, but at the end of the day, I just feel best voting with my conscience.
Let's go to another board here. And there, things have widened just a little bit for the NDP, 48.5% for Sheila Malcolmson now. Tony Harris sitting at the same spot, 41.2%. Michelle Ney up slightly, 7.5%. So we're not exactly seeing that vote. Well, somewhat of a vote split. At least it hasn't broken the Liberals' way in terms of the Greens siphoning off support. Fair to say, Gerald?
Yeah, I mean, I think the by-election has essentially come down to who do you want to be government, whether you want it to continue to be the NDP or whether voters are saying they want to cause some chaos and get put the Liberals in a better position perhaps to challenge the NDP and maybe see an early election. And so you can be forgiven as a voter in Nanaimo for sort of saying, well, it's time to just kind of go with the party that you want to be in government and leave the Greens kind of out of the equation. And that seems to be happening a little bit with them not coming even half of the votes that they got in the 2017 election.
Now, we referenced it earlier. We were talking about what could happen if the Liberals win and we have a tie in the legislature between the government alliance, CASA, and the Liberals. And lots of questions around Speaker Darryl Plekis' role. And God knows he's been getting a lot of attention because of his report into spending at the legislature by those two senior officers still suspended. Can you clarify for us, if he is to vote, does he get to decide on what is a confidence measure, essentially what could cause a government to fall?
No, some of the strong constitutional conventions decide what it is. So
just look them up.
No, but a budget is definitely a confidence measure, whether a government or a speaker says it is or not. So that's unquestioned. The role of the speaker in voting is a little bit less clear. We would expect a speaker to kind of keep things moving. That's sort of the bottom line, that a speaker sort of doesn't want to stop things from happening.
That's convention.
And that's convention as well. There's also an understanding that the speaker doesn't want to be too partisan. But we're in a situation now which is quite strange because he's not a member of any of the political parties. He was kicked out of the BC Liberal caucus when he chose to become speaker. He was essentially vilified by both sides at the beginning of this,
yes,
imbroglio with the senior officers. And so now with his report out and a sort of new credibility for him with the population in BC because of his unearthing of all this. I think he's in a really strong position to be an independent and to vote the way he wants and not really risk any of the kind of credibility he has in the House because he's not going to be called a partisan for keeping it going one way or the other. So I'm a bit more sanguine than some about the future, even if we have an election result tonight that results in a tie. And there's not a lot of votes that the NDP have to win to stay in power for more than a year. They have to bring forward a budget. You got to bring that in about 3 weeks.
That's right.
That gets through with the vote of the Speaker, let's say, in this particular scenario.
We're just going to go to a board right now, Gerald. Apologies for that interruption. Let's get an update now. Sheila Malcolmson widening that lead, 48.8%. Tony Harris's vote dropping slightly, 40.7%. 7.7% for Michelle Ney. Let's go back to Tanya Fletcher, who is at Sheila Malcolmson's headquarters. What are people there saying, thinking, feeling, drinking, Tanya, as they see these results come in?
Yeah, well, they are drinking, and it's because of good reasons, not bad, I think. Take a listen. So that's what you hear every couple of minutes. The crowd just starts cheering when they see the latest results being updated. And, we see Sheila Malcolmson having a bit of a, not a huge margin, but a bit of a lead. And I think that's what people here are expecting. As we mentioned at the campaign offices earlier there, we saw John Horgan working the room. We saw a lot of the NDP heavyweights out and a lot of that NDP orange all around town. And that they are desperate to hang on to this seat, and it's evident. And they're trying to remain casual and confident and very assured going into tonight. But they know the stakes are huge, and that is felt. We were talking with the reporters as we were setting up here tonight, just behind here, and we looked around the room and said, this feels more like a general election and just the room setup. They've got a massive bar, they've got a huge snacks table over there, several hundred people now crammed into this room, and you would rarely see that for a simple by-election in any riding in BC. So that, even just looking around the room and just the grandeur of this by-election gives you an idea of just how high the stakes are and how seriously the NDP at least is taking the results here tonight.
Grandeur indeed. Well said, Tanya. You've been on the ground in Nanaimo as our provincial affairs reporter for a couple of days now. Has anything stood out to you, surprised you about what people have told you about this by-election?
It's funny, I think talking to people, we often talk about voter apathy, and that's often something we speak about is how fewer and fewer people are becoming engaged in politics. And we looked at, the Plekas report, the big spending scandal at the BC legislature that exploded last week. I'm going to wait till that noise dies down. And, we had people assuming that while that wouldn't change necessarily who people voted for, it might affect whether they vote at all. And so there was almost an assumed apathy there, I suppose, on the position of voters. But what I saw here was almost the exact opposite. And the candidates themselves expressed that. They said instead of keeping voters home, it was those reasons that were mobilizing voters to get out. Because as we've heard, a lot of people in Nanaimo have felt overshadowed by Victoria. I think someone described them as the ugly second cousin. And so they've often felt overshadowed by the big news out of Victoria. And so given the Plekas report, given the grand implications of this particular by-election, did they feel that their local issues were going to get eclipsed by, the rest of the province? And it seems like they've turned that on its head. They said, no, that's a reason for us to get out and vote because we know how powerful our votes are going to be, and we understand that the power that our ballots are wielding. And so it's almost an ownership that they've felt. And so it's really encouraging, I suppose, to talk to people, regardless of who they were voting for, recognizing that they play a key role in this, and they're proud of that, and they're going to take that to the polls.
Tanya Fletcher, thanks very much. We'll check in with you a little bit later. Appreciate it. Time to go now to another update, and perhaps this will give us an indication of why there was such a loud cheer there. We've hit the 50% mark by 0.4%. Gerald, Sheila Malcolmson is leading with 50.4%. Tony Harris dropping slightly, 39.2%. Michelle Ney, 7.7%. 40 of 111 polls reporting. Time to go now to your questions and comments. We've been asking for them on social media, and Alex Migdal joins us now with some of those comments and questions. Alex.
Hey, Dan. So we have taken a look at social media, and obviously with an election this tight, there is going to be some divided reaction here. So I just kind of want to throw some tweets and give you a sense of what people have been saying about the Nanaimo election or by-election in the past day. Ryan Mitten here tweeted a photo that he says at the last minute, this ad by Sheila Malcolmson has papered neighborhoods with cowardly attack flyers. One homeowner gave this to me and said she was disgusted by these slimy ads. I guess Sheila was too, because she didn't want to put her name on it. And of course, that drew its own rebuttals from critics who said that the ads were simply speaking truths about the BC Liberals. Another tweet from Oriana here says, just been reminded of the election in Nanaimo today. That might take us to another provincial election. If the Libs win a provincial election, I'm worried all the good programs the NDP have started will go in the trash. What will poor people do under another Liberal government? And lastly, a bit of a more lighthearted tweet from Diamond Isinger here on Twitter. She says, thinking about popcorn for the BC Poly by-election watching tonight, but folks, there has never been a better day than today to buy Nanaimo bars. Acquire sweet treats, go home, eat 1 million of them while watching Nanaimo results come in, and feel like a patriotic BCer. You're welcome. So obviously adding some maybe much needed levity to what is a very tight race here. And a question that has arisen on social media from several people is actually how the release of the report by House Speaker Gerald Plekis may factor into tonight's election result, and perhaps we can throw that back to Gerald.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We'll get to those questions and comments. Alex Migdal, thanks very much. Nanaimo bars. Somebody said they just call them bars in Nanaimo rather than Nanaimo bars.
I actually
Seems
stopped
a bit
at the Safeway to
churlish.
pick them up on my way here, and they didn't have any. So.
Yeah, I noticed there were no snacks, Jerry. Tell us about absentee ballots. We know that we'd heard that. What's the process behind that?
Yeah, so absentee ballots will be counted last because they do come in by mail and the rest. So I think they leave those until the end. They're a little bit more complicated. You got to check the envelopes and all the kind of stuff we heard about during the referendum result. And so when they'll count those at the end of the night. If it's a really close race, we're talking about 1,000, I think, or so right now is what we're hearing. That could be the difference in a really tight race. That's a few less absentee ballots than the last time. So it's a different story than we've been hearing about all the advance poll. Right. With about 20% of eligible voters voting in advance. That seems to be a sign that people were taking that role seriously. Mm-hmm. The kind of civics that Tanya was pointing to. People seeing the power that Nanaimo voters have in this election.
That's right.
Set the fate of BC politics to some
Let's
degree.
go back to some of these results. Thank you, Gerald. We now have another update. Sheila Malcolmson widening that lead just slightly, 50.5% now. Tony Harris at 39.3%. Michelle Ney dropping slightly to 7.6%. 43 of 111 polls reporting. I think it's time to go back now to the Liberal campaign headquarters and Jesse Johnston. What's the mood there, Jesse?
Well, Dan, it's not the situation that the BC Liberals wanted to be in, obviously. They're still behind, although we're still fairly early on in the evening. But the message that I'm hearing increasingly from people here is that what they've been able to do over the last few weeks is bring in the entire cavalry of the party and build the groundwork that may or may not go so well for them tonight, but what they're hoping is that moving forward, this will become a winnable riding for them. This has been an NDP stronghold for a long time. And they've had, so they've been focusing on coming here, building up a volunteer base so that when the next election rolls around, they'll be in a good position. And they still haven't given up hope here either. They're hoping that maybe there's some strong Liberal polls that will be coming in the next little while. Definitely not as loud here, though, as it was, say, 15 or 20 minutes ago.
Jesse, you've been on the ground there since yesterday. What have you been hearing from voters, similar to the question we asked Tanya, around what people are talking about?
Everyone in Nanaimo that I've spoken with has been acutely aware of the big picture political ramifications of this vote, and there are definitely people that feel strongly one way or another about whether they want to see a provincial election. But for the most part, the people I've talked to are concerned about local issues. They feel like Nanaimo is a forgotten place. They're concerned about homelessness, about poverty, about housing, about affordability. And those are the issues, talking to canvassers here, that have mostly been coming up on the doorstep.
All right, Jesse Johnston, thanks very much. We're going to go to another results board, and it's tightened slightly, dropping for Sheila Malcolmson, but relatively low, 49.9% for her. Tony Harris at 40%, Michelle Ney down at 7.5%. It looks like things are kind of splitting as perhaps people expected. Although we did hear from somebody said that, at least online, that they would dub this that the Green vote has essentially collapsed. Would you agree with that, Gerald? What do you think?
I mean, it's not a collapse. It certainly is not what Andrew Weaver and the rest of his party would want to see. The breakthrough of 2017, it was a significant breakthrough, and I think they would hope to see some of that momentum carry through. I mean, I think that's what this election, this by-election is about in many ways, is the momentum that either of the parties have going into a 2020 or a 2021 election. They're testing out their messages, they're testing out a new leader in the case of the Liberal Party, they're testing out their campaign strategies and tactics and logos, and so, this is a real dry run in some ways for a future election. Whether it comes as a result of this one or not is, I think, still up in the air. Getting closer to the point where we might say that the NDP have a pretty good chance. We're almost at 50% of the polls coming in.
Well, we did hit almost. She hit 50% of the vote.
50% of the polls.
That's right, but we're still waiting for the 50% of the polls. Yeah. Remind us again of what the split could be in and around the demographics. You talked about areas where there would traditionally be older voters, younger voters, and in downtown. Remind us of that again.
Yeah, so I mean, Nanaimo, the Nanaimo area has 3 different provincial ridings, one for Parksville, Qualicum Beach, the other for Nanaimo itself, and that's actually the smallest of the 3, and then Nanaimo North Cowichan. But the Nanaimo riding is the smallest but most population dense, and so what you get in a riding like that is quite a lot of demographic variation. And so in the northern part of the riding, which is again closer to the shore, closer to those other beach areas that kind of pretty consistently have brought the BC Liberals to the legislature, you're likely to get a more BC Liberal voting group. I mean, that means in the more dense areas, you're going to have slower polls because they're probably a bit busier.
That's right.
And so the count might come in a little bit later. So, I would think if I was an NDPer, I'd be watching that and saying, well, we got our core is coming up. So this might be bad news for the Liberals if their sort of typical suburban ridings are the ones, parts of the riding are the ones that have already reported.
Somebody, let's dive into the tea leaves for just a moment now. Somebody had suggested that the Liberals would not be overly upset if they didn't win this riding. A, history is not on their side, and B, there may be a concern that if they were to win this and trigger an election, that the electorate would still be pretty bitter at them after 16 years in power and governments build up baggage, A. But B, some of the revelations we're hearing from the Plecas report. And given that people have argued that they didn't do enough to curb these things, so...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the case. And even if they did win tonight, and we're in that situation where the House is a tie with the Speaker, they might still want the NDP and the Greens to govern for another 12 months or 18 months, because it gives them the chance to keep rebuilding the way that they want to give a longer record to that CASA agreement and to that particular coalition as it's formed for the time being. More opportunities for maybe the kinds of things that they would identify as missteps that they could point to. So the speculation tax. We thought that was going to be the issue in this riding. It seems to have changed because of the Plecas report, because of those things. We haven't talked about it nearly as much as we sort of saw at the beginning. But in the Liberals' opinion, it might be good for the NDP to govern a little bit more, and then they have a bit more to criticize rather than having a 2020 election based on the 16 years of Liberal rule before. Let's
look at another board now. We have an update for you. 50% for Sheila Malcolmson. Tony Harris at 40.1%. Michelle Ney up slightly to 7.3%. And we're getting close to that almost half number for 51 of 111 polls reporting. Gerald, what do you make of what we're seeing right now, at least? Slight fluctuations.
I mean, I think it's getting to the point where we can start to be a bit more confident. We haven't employed the results desk kind of algorithms
That's
tonight.
Right.
I don't think
Smoke-filled
we're probably a little bit more
here.
reliant on the real results this time. But you're getting to that point where you might have the confidence to say that this is probably an NDP hold tonight. They're still leading by a kind of margin that they would have expected to lead and that they have won this riding by in the past. So nothing is really different as a result of tonight. We got a lot excited about it, but I think we're pretty close to being able to say that pretty definitively. But there are signs here of what's changing in BC politics. The Liberals are taking some of that Green support, I think, this time, and that could be really consequential in the next election.
Let's go back to NDP campaign headquarters with Tanya Fletcher, who's going to give us another taste of the mood there, along with, well, all those beers that I see behind you, Tanya.
I'm happy to say I have stuck to water. You'll be proud of me. But a lot of people here have not. Yeah, they're already celebrating. Got some wine flowing. The bar is, there's a big lineup at the bar. The snacks table is growing, and yet people here are several hundred people in this room. And as we mentioned before, this has more of a general election feel than a simple by-election. We reporters were remarking about, you know, when was the last time, if ever, a by-election generated this kind of buzz? And so the NDP has gone all out. The stakes are high, and you know, we saw the interest reflected perhaps in the advanced polling numbers. This is a riding with some 45,000 people. More than 9,000 of them, over 20%, voted ahead of time. And I asked people about that on the street. I said, what do you make of that here in Nanaimo? Is this just such a political town where people will, you know, are so eager to get their vote in that you would expect that? Or is it because the stakes are so high in this particular by-election? And they said, no, we know the implications. We understand exactly the power of our ballots. And so, you know, they thought it was because of the uniqueness of this by-election that we saw so many people voting early. And so, you know, as we see these results trickle again and again, it is definitely a confident mood. However, we haven't seen Premier John Horgan out mingling with this crowd yet. Some of us were wondering if they have perhaps a separate party maybe in the back. Maybe that's where Sheila Malcolmson is, because at this point it's mainly volunteers, lots of media, lots of party supporters. But of course, we did see John Horgan out earlier at the campaign offices and throughout the campaign on the ground in Nanaimo. And you know, he recognized that this is a high stakes game, and he was there to provide all the support he could.
Tanya Fletcher, thanks very much for joining us. We'll check in a little bit later. Time to go now to another results board. Let's see what this says. 53 of 111 polls reporting Sheila Malcolmson dropping slightly, 49.9%. Tony Harris at 40.1%. Michelle Ney at 7.2%. Gerald, interestingly, you have, as the Premier has pointed out, he is born and raised Islander. Sorry about that, Tanya. We will get to you. You'll get your turn. One moment. We've got a premier who is born and raised on the island. You've got Leonard Krogh, who was a longtime NDP MLA in Nanaimo, now the mayor. Sheila Malcolmson, if she does pull this off, I mean, this is essentially a relatively, well, it's a stronghold for the government here, and especially given concerns, at least on the partisan side from the NDP, that Nanaimo had been neglected for years under the NDP. Under the Liberals, I should say.
I mean, it certainly wasn't neglected for the last couple of weeks, right? And
Heavens, no.
I mean, and that's an indication, I think, of how serious the NDP take it. They want, I mean, both sides, you know, in my previous scenario, maybe the Liberals want the NDP to stay in power for a little bit longer. I think the NDP want to stay in power too, obviously, and so they're willing to throw those kinds of resources at it. They're, you know, investments in hospitals, things like that, that they could make those immediate kind of impacts during the campaign. You know, seeing you know, all these leaders, all the, you know, the senior members of the party spending time there during the campaign, really trying to demonstrate to the people of Nanaimo that the government was taking them seriously, wants to be there. You know, I think it's not a surprise. Finding a strong candidate, you know, having someone who's willing to drop their federal seat to come to the provincial. We have to ask what her future is in the BC NDP. You know, maybe a cabinet shuffle coming up before we get to another election, because she certainly would be a high-profile addition to that cabinet.
Absolutely, and coming with federal experience as well, so she knows how to pull some levers in Ottawa, especially when it comes to all sorts of issues. Where and with a federal election coming up,
she's not a federal Liberal, so
no, that's right. No, that's true.
That's right.
But I mean, she knows how to maneuver in Ottawa perhaps better than others do.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Time to go to another board now. Let's have a look at these results. 49.9% for Sheila Malcolmson, still maintaining that 8 or 9% lead. 58 of 111 polls reporting 40.1 for Tony Harris, and Michelle Ney at 7.3%. Great. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on Twitter. You were joining CBC News Vancouver's and CBC News BC's coverage of the Nanaimo by-election. We want to recap another top story we have for you tonight, one that has garnered a lot of attention. A transit police officer was shot earlier today near the Surrey Scott Road SkyTrain station. Police at this hour are still looking for the suspect. They have put out a suspect description. We're going to put that up in just a moment. But police did give us an update earlier today. Take a listen.
At approximately 4:20 p.m., Surrey RCMP received 911 calls reporting a shooting. At the same time, RCMP were alerted by Metro Vancouver Transit Police that one of their officers had been shot at the Scott Road SkyTrain station platform. The officer has received serious but non-life-threatening injuries and has been transported to hospital. The suspect is described as an adult male in his 20s with dark skin, dark stubble goatee, and a mustache. He was last seen wearing a blue hoodie, white Nike brand running shoes with a black swoosh. We currently have 2 areas of containment set up. There's King George Boulevard to 114th Avenue and 125 A Street to 124 Street. The Scott Road SkyTrain station is closed. No new vehicles can enter the area or the station, but officers are there to escort people into the parking lot and will assist them to get their vehicles out of the area. We are still asking people to avoid the area. For residents who live within the containment area, we are asking you to stay inside and to lock your doors. Please turn on any exterior lights and call 911 if you see anything suspicious. And please do not attempt to apprehend the suspect if you see him or encounter him. Please call police, call 911.
We want to show you that suspect board and give you a description again. This is the gentleman that they are looking for, said to be a dark-skinned man with a mustache, a goatee, Nike swoop shoes. He is considered armed and dangerous. If you see him or if you know where he is, call 911 immediately. Do not approach him. Consider him armed and dangerous. Now, we heard earlier today that a school, in fact, was in a hold and secure position because of this. That has now since been lifted. And for any other information you want on this story, head to cbc.ca/BC. Thankfully, the transit police officer, who is a 27-year-old officer, a few years on the force, is expected to be okay. Back now to our coverage of the provincial by-election in Nanaimo. Let's throw up some more boards, a board of results for you. 49.6%. I'm going to get these numbers right one of these days, Gerald. For Sheila Malcolmson, Tony Harris sitting basically the same at 40.4%. 7.3% for Michelle Ney of the Green Party. 60 of 111 polls reporting we've reached that halfway point. Gerald, you were talking earlier a bit about some of the larger urban centers, some of the population pockets that haven't reported yet. Which ones are you talking about?
Yeah, so I think what we can kind of divine from the numbers at this point, about 10,000 voters in a little bit more than half of the polls reporting. We had 27,000 in the provincial election. Given the advanced poll numbers, we would expect those numbers to be fairly similar. And so, some of that, more densely populated portions of Nanaimo, I think, would be the ones that we're still waiting for. That's good news for the NDP, I would think, that those are the parts of the riding that they're likely to do well. So again, this is the kind of thing that would go into those algorithms if we had a fancy decision desk tonight, and we don't, but that's all right. It's up here.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's why we brought you on.
Say we're getting definitely in that direction.
All right. Yeah. Time to go back now to Tanya Fletcher, our provincial affairs reporter. Oh, sorry, she's not ready quite yet. Yes, this is live television, live Facebook, live, sometimes radio, live online. And now it's time to go to Jesse Johnston, who is at Liberal Party headquarters, who is also not quite ready. As you can see, it's sort of a moving target at this point. At this point, folks. Gerald, remind us again.
They're expecting me to talk longer.
That's right. That's right. Thank God we got some mints up here. Tell us again, is there a magic number that we're looking for here in terms of when we're not going to project something, but when it's safe to call something?
Yeah, I think we're actually pretty close to that now. It's a good 10-point lead. An historic. One of the other things that goes into those kinds of algorithms is what the history of the riding was, and we know the history of the riding is that it's largely an NDP riding, that the NDP win by comfortable margins. The fact that the Green vote is staying at that 7%, not getting anywhere near the 20% that it was in the 2017 election, suggests that this is a pattern that we're going to see, across the rest of the campaign.
We're going to jump to Tanya Fletcher now, who is back at the NDP campaign headquarters with a guest. Tanya.
Let the guests just introduce themselves and let us know how it's going here tonight.
Hi there, thanks. My name is Graham Johnston and I'm the Nanaimo Constituency Association President, and it's going pretty well.
How many people would you expect are here, and who are all these people?
Well, right now we've got, I'd say about 200 people here, but we expect more to come in. The volunteer turnout has been incredible, and we still have so many people who are hard at work counting and scrutinizing the vote. And I expect more to trickle in as time goes, and what a great atmosphere in here.
I was just talking about that before, about how this feels more like a general election rather than, I don't want to call it a mere by-election, because this by-election has extremely high stakes, but Where did you mobilize this base? Because presumably it's not just the locals. Where is this support coming from to get out that NDP vote?
Well, you know, the bulk of the day-to-day volunteers were from Nanaimo, and they're Nanaimo residents, and I'm happy to say, as the Constituency Association president, that so many good Nanaimo residents poured their heart and soul into the campaign, but really they came from everywhere. As you know, residents of British Columbia, we know what's at stake here, and yeah, no, it's amazing. But I just heard they're calling the election now, so you know what? I think I got to go.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And Dan, we're standing by with the latest results, so we'll send it back to you for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And we're hearing a big cheer there now. And it is time. The CBC News decision desk is making a call right now that NDP's Sheila Malcolmson has won the by-election, the provincial by-election in Nanaimo. At last check, she had a lead of about 49% of the ballots counted, and we were looking at about just over half of those results of the 111 riding. CBC News decision desk deciding to call this race for Sheila Malcolmson, given the numbers that we're seeing breaking down right now. Gerald, what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, the scenarios we were thinking about, perhaps that we'll be looking at a new provincial election. I think that's essentially off the table now. You know, the NDP will go on as they did. I mean, I think they must have had some confidence about that in terms of willingness of Krog to leave, to run for mayor of Nanaimo, that this was a place that they could afford to let an MLA go, but they need that seat, obviously, and they want to keep that very slim advantage in the legislature without having to resort to the vote of the speaker, although that would have been a scenario. So, you know, the rest of the country is going to have to just take heart at our exceptionalism on weather instead of our weird BC politics.
I'm not sure we want to go there tonight for anybody who's watching slightly east of this province.
Right, but I mean, we sometimes are kind of the laughing stock, and certainly the issues with the clerk and the sergeant at arms have got a lot of people saying, "Oh, what's going on in BC again?" You know, another kind of wacky scenario with an essentially tied legislature, I think, would have added fuel to that fire. Yes. So now we're probably in a little bit more of a quiet time again in BC politics. Let's let Alberta or somebody else take the spotlight for a while. With
yes, because they haven't had anything going on. That's right. Let's look at these numbers just a little bit. We're going to break these down for you just right now. So, as it stood, 48.94% for Sheila Malcolmson. The numbers themselves, the raw polling numbers, and there they are again, 48.9, 41.1 for Tony Harris, and 7.2 for Michelle Ney. Those raw numbers are 5,322 for Sheila Malcolmson, 4,470 for Tony Harris, and Michelle Ney, 783. So once again, the CBC News decision desk is projecting that Sheila Malcolmson will win as the NDP's newest MLA in Nanaimo, and that's with 64 of 111 ballot boxes reporting. Time to go now to Liberal campaign headquarters with Jesse Johnston and a somewhat subdued party there. Jesse.
Yeah, Dan, definitely not as loud as it was here a little while ago. We're here with Mike Bernier, Liberal MLA. And Mike, what's going through your mind as you're watching those results come up on the screen?
Yeah, well, first of all, you know, we're really proud of Tony. What an amazing MLA he could be if he still wins tonight. Obviously, it's not looking that promising right now. But I think he mostly did a great job bringing some of the issues of Nanaimo forward and talking about the issues that the NDP are lacking for the area. And it really helped bring profile to the fact that there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. I mean, really, when you look right now, we've done better in this by-election than we have in provincial elections. Tony's just done an amazing job.
You were talking political strategy a little bit before I came over and got you. Moving forward, what's the future for your party in this riding?
Well, first of all, of course, our job as opposition is to make sure we hold the NDP to account. There's a lot of concern out there when you look at all of the increased taxes, and forefront right now, the spec tax, the empty home tax. It's not really working. It's really frustrating people. When you look at how they botched the proportional representation referendum, there's a lot of things we're hearing that people are really expecting government to do better. And of course, our job, no matter what happens tonight, is to continue working hard, holding them to account, and making sure that good decisions are being made for people in BC.
You've been out there on the doorsteps, you've been in the riding for a while talking to people. How often did it come up that people just have voter fatigue and they're not ready to go back to the polls if there's another election?
Yeah, obviously that's something that people are really concerned about. The NDP, I think, tried to capitalize on the fact with their candidate that, hey, vote for us, you don't have to have an election. I think some of that might have played into a little bit. I actually did hear from people on the doorstep between the proportional representation, between provincial elections, a federal election this year, municipal election. It does get frustrating for people. But at the end of the day, what we also heard was how amazing Tony Harris is and how he'd do a good job representing. So he's done a great job. We're not giving up hope yet. They're declaring an NDP win, but there's still a lot of absentee ballots and others to look at. So.
You're heading back to Victoria after this. You say you still got work to do there. What can you say about the makeup of the legislature and how you're going to work with the opposition, or how you're going to work with the other parties going forward?
Yeah, especially when you look right now, tonight's results, I think there's a couple of different things. Everybody predicted an easy win for the NDP, and I'd say it wasn't easy. But they also, what they're seeing tonight, is a huge reduction in support for the Green Party. They're down at about 6-7% right now compared to the 20 that people expected that they should try to get. I think that's going to send a strong message to the Green Party of their support and what they should be doing with their support around the NDP. So when you look at a minority government and a shakeup, anything could happen. And so I think what people should remember is that it's always on shaky ground right now. We've got our job to do. It's only being held together because of the 3 Green Party members, and who knows how long that can last.
Okay, there you have it. Dan, not quite as loud as it's been here over the last little while, and we'll go back to you in the studio.
Jesse, thanks very much. Let's go to an updated board for you now, looking at those results after CBC News called it for Sheila Malcolmson. 60 of 111 polls reporting 48.5% for Sheila Malcolmson. Tony Harris at 41.2%. Michelle Ney at 7.4%. Not a lot of movement there, we see, Gerald Byer, even after, and I know that we had 64 of 111 polls reporting, but it really hasn't moved that much, has it?
Yeah, that's where we can have the confidence to sort of project and say that it's going to, she hasn't really broken below 47%, I think, in the numbers we've been seeing so far tonight.
Apologies, we're going to go to Tanya Fletcher right now, who is once again at NDP Party campaign headquarters, where I assume the lineup to the bar is still just as vigorous, Tanya.
Yes, it is. And while the lineup at the Liberal headquarters where Jesse is may be long for different reasons, the champagne is now flowing here. The volume here, while it may have gotten much louder here coincidentally or simultaneously, got much quieter over across at the Liberal campaign headquarters. And yeah, the people here are certainly breathing a sigh of relief. We're just going to pan around and show you a bit of the room. And people are chatting, they're drinking, they were hugging and high-fiving. And we really saw that after my last hit with you, we had our guest, and that's when we saw that really sizable lead by Sheila Malcolmson. I've just pulled in this gentleman to chat. I don't even know your name. What's your name?
I'm Kyle.
Kyle.
Nice to meet you.
And you're obviously an NDP supporter. Are you a volunteer as well, or tell me why you're here?
I am a volunteer. I've worked on Sheila's campaign. I've worked on Leonard's campaign. I grew up here. I live here. I'm just really excited to see Nanaimo take this great step.
I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to ask you your age.
I'm 26.
Okay, so a relatively young person. That's been the whole question, right? Is getting out the vote and getting out the young vote. How does that play into this by-election?
It's huge. Just saw something today saying millennials, our age, are now the biggest voting bloc since the boomers, which is huge, because if you can get us mobilized and passionate about the actual issues, we'll come out and we will win.
There have been a lot of people, skeptical about, the local issues being overshadowed by, the BC legislature spending scandal and some of those grander headlines out of Victoria. Is that what you were hearing from people, knocking on doors and from people in Nanaimo?
Not at all. On the doorstep, it's about housing issues, and what makes it affordable for people to live here. The speculation tax, I'm sure if you are fortunate enough to be a homeowner, you gotta go and fill out a form for 5 minutes that it takes, but it's really about the at the doorstep issues, and
I'm gonna have to to interrupt you. I don't know if you heard behind us at the podium. He just went up there and said, "We won," and that's why the crowd is cheering. We're going to step aside, and here comes Premier John Horgan. Take a listen.
If you're just joining us, we are waiting for Premier John Horgan and for the NDP-elect MLA for Nanaimo. CBC News projecting that Sheila Malcolmson has won the provincial by-election in Nanaimo. At last check, some of those vote results, and as we say, we're just waiting for the Premier and Sheila Malcolmson to come to the stage in Nanaimo there. Tanya Fletcher speaking with Kyle, one of the young volunteers who was helping get out the vote for Sheila Malcolmson. At last check, according to Elections BC, Sheila Malcolmson clocked in at 48.79% of the vote. Tony Harris with the BC Liberal Party, 40.99%. That breaks down to about 6,200 votes for Sheila Malcolmson, 5,200 votes for Tony Harris. So looking about a 1,000 point difference there. Michelle Ney running in third with the BC Green Party, 937 votes, 7.38%. And look at all the placards there. You can see Premier John Horgan and NDP-elect MLA Sheila Malcolmson on the stage. Let's go back there and hear what they have to say.
Good evening, Nanaimo. It is such a thrill to be here. Apparently, governments don't often win by-elections. Candidate Sheila's caliber and the hard work of people in this room and right across the city, we have returned a New Democrat to Nanaimo. The project continues. The government's on its way. For the past month, Sheila's been crisscrossing the city with all of you, knocking on doors, talking to people, and what she heard was validation of what we've been doing for the past 18 months. Focusing. You want to clap? Have a clap. Have a clap. Sheila talked about the issues that matter to the people of Nanaimo. She talked about health care. She talked about the neglect of the ICU, about seniors care, about the introduction of child care to change lives for young families here in Nanaimo and right across BC. She talked about the environment and the importance of having a government that understands that the economy and the environment are not two separate things. They're one thing. And working in harmony, we can do anything in this great province and anything in this great city. I want to thank Michelle and Tony for the campaign that they ran. I want to say to Andrew Weaver and Andrew Wilkinson, I look forward to seeing you in the legislature with the next MLA from Nanaimo to talk about making a better BC. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I please have the privilege of introducing your next MLA, Sheila Malcolmson.
Smokes, what a beautiful crowd. I'm so honored to be on Nanaimo territory. I'm so honored to be with so many friends, so many of you who worked so hard this past month to get this fantastic win tonight. Thank you. Thank you to the other candidates. Congratulations to Tony and to Michelle for their campaigns and being willing to serve. Thank you to the voters who came out in such big numbers. Nanaimo was not election fatigued, as it turns out. Thank you to the voters. And to all of you who worked so hard to make this happen, our positive message, the work that's been done to already lift people up in just a year and a half. We're so encouraged to be able to keep that work on, and it would not have happened without you. Thank you. So we've got a lot of work to do starting tomorrow. We are building affordable housing. We are expanding childcare. We are getting an urgent primary care center, more doctors for people. We are standing up and protecting the coast. We are defending against the risk of expanded oil tankers. We are protecting from oil spills. We're protecting jobs doing it. And we are making sure, carrying on the project that the NDP has been working on the last year and a half with the Greens. We are ratcheting down climate change emissions in the most ambitious program North America has, and we are building, generating green jobs while doing it. And so we are going to work together to tackle the issues that we face. I am so honored to have served with Leonard Krogh as MLA. I'm so honored to carry his work on. And with the mayor and the new council in Nanaimo, we are going to generate positive results for people right here at home. So there is work to do, and most especially as New Democrats do like nobody else does, we are going to make sure that prosperity is shared. We have the strongest jobs record. We have the strongest economy in the country right now, but we need to make sure that is shared by everyone. That's our prime directive. So we are going to have a party tonight to celebrate the hard work of all of you. Almost 1,000 volunteers working on this campaign. Yeah. And too many people to name, and so I'm not going to even try to name you all, but I want to thank my amazing spouse, Howard Stiff. You are a rock. I want to thank Chief Wise and Nanaimo First Nation. They really worked hard for us and with us, and I'm determined to work with you moving forward on the path to reconciliation. Strong, strong partners. And I have to say, my campaign manager, Karen Cooling, is fantastic. And her team that they're still working right back at the campaign office now. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm honored by your work. We have done this together. This is a victory for Nanaimo, for our volunteer base, for all the people that talked with us on doorsteps, everybody that came out and voted and participated. We are going to keep working with you and for you. Congratulations, Nanaimo, and thank you for this amazing honor.
There you go. That's you, man. That's you. That's you.
Flowers and congratulations for Sheila Malcolmson. CBC News has projected that she is going to be the next MLA in Nanaimo, and relatively handily given the breakdown of the vote tonight. Time to go to our social media editor, Alex Migdal, who has been curating your comments and taking your questions. Alex.
That's right, Dan. Obviously, tonight's election brought disappointment from Liberal supporters, but also relief from NDP supporters. But there are some other takeaways that I want to bring up to you on social media. One was just how closely watched this election actually was. People on social media describing how they were madly refreshing the election's BC website. Torrance Costi here asks, who would have thought single riding by-elections are just as stressful as province-wide general elections, adding chuckles nervously into the void. Another takeaway is actually when it comes to political polling, we know a few days ago a study came out, or political polling came out, suggesting that BC Liberals had a 13-point lead to the NDPs, and people are now criticizing that online. We have a tweet here from Ryan Clayton saying, Main Street Research can just pack up and leave now. And Colin here says, political polling is taking a beating in #BCPoly. And lastly, people are bringing up the standing of the Green Party in this election. Adam Pankratz here tweets, "The really interesting result tonight is the BC Greens dropping like a stone. Could have huge ramifications for the next provincial election." But we heard from some commenters on our Facebook Live that that isn't necessarily the case. Tim Daniel on our Facebook Live said, "Green support hasn't collapsed. Progressive voters were afraid of a vote split and voted NDP. Many would have voted Green if they could." So Dan, obviously lots of reaction, lots of opinions tonight, but always entertaining to see what's happening on social media.
No kidding. And Alex, we very much appreciate you curating it all and bringing us up the best of what people were offering up on social media from around BC and Nanaimo as well. Alex McDowell, thanks very much for joining us. Now time to look at the final update we're going to give for the numbers in this provincial by-election. Let's take a look. So with 81 of 111 polls reporting, really need to get my eyes checked, 48.9% for Sheila Malcolmson, Tony Harris at 40.9%, 7.3% for the Greens, Michelle Ney, Gerald Byer. Can you sum up for us what you saw tonight and how it broke down?
So not a lot of surprises. I don't think it's a surprising night. I mean, the NDP held on to a seat that they've had for a long time, did so with about the same share of the popular vote that they had in the provincial election less than 2 years ago. So, not much has changed that way. What we did see is a bit of a surge for the Liberals, certainly better than they did the last time. It suggests something going on in the province, and definitely that drop for the Greens. I think, the party that's going to be most interested in a debrief tomorrow morning is probably the Green Party. I don't think it was a result of worries about vote splitting, because the NDP numbers are pretty much the same as they were in the last election. So definitely something that the Greens have to be worried about, and could definitely change some of the dynamic in the election to come. And so questions about whether the Greens sold their soul in having this coalition and so on, those I think will be the tough questions, and how they can kind of push back, and that will change the dynamic of the legislature probably going forward, more than the numbers in the House would have.
Lots to consider. Gerald Byer, UBC political science professor, we always appreciate your time and your insight and your analysis, and we'll be watching for it. And thank you for joining us tonight on Facebook Live, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on our website, cbc.ca/BC. That is where you're going to find the latest on the results tonight. Tanya Fletcher, Jesse Johnston, and our team will be curating more stories for you in the days ahead. Some analysis, what this means for the government going forward. How long will John Horgan be able to govern under this confidence and supply agreement? And what will the Liberals do now, since perhaps they did better than people expected, but still on the opposition side of the legislature? Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm Dan Burritt, and we'll have all the latest news on this and the officer's shot at the Surrey SkyTrain station at 11 o'clock tonight on CBC Television. Good night.